All right, I think we'll get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. It is sunny out, but they're saying, I don't know, I guess there's going to be a change. So we'll be here together. So I've got a couple opening remarks before we start our program. My name is Julie Zunker, and I'm the board member of the Seattle Public Library Foundation. I want to thank you all for coming tonight to this beautiful library. Someone had asked, how long has it been here? So I think many of you can probably answer that question, but we're just celebrating our 20th year at the Central in this new building. And we're here to celebrate and kick off Seattle Reads 2025. So before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the land that we're on. The Seattle Public Library is on Indigenous land. These are the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people, past and present. We acknowledge the land with gratitude. We hope you will use the library to study, understand, and act in a way that inspires you. And we hope that this year's Seattle Reads selection, You Are Here, Poetry in the Natural World, encourages you to reflect on our relationship with the land, environment, and the people around us. Thanks to all of you who are donors, advocates, volunteers, and supporters of your library. As you know, the foundation is the library's nonprofit fundraising and advocacy partner. We raise private funding that supports the library above and beyond what public funding provides, and we advocate to increase public funding. Your gifts to the foundation help add more than 100,000 books to the library's collection every year and support around 50 initiatives that expand opportunities for literacy, enrichment, and empowerment for library patrons. Seattle Reads is a signature library program thanks to the donors that support it. It was the first, quote, one city, one book program started in 1998, and now that model is replicated in hundreds of other cities. More than 9,000 people participate annually, reading the selected book and attending events. And congratulations to all of you tonight for starting off another great year of Seattle Reads. And thanks to your donations, copies of You Are Here have been available this evening at the front table here. And every library branch will have copies, and it will be easy to check out in person or digitally. And I actually want to put a plug in to doing both, because listening to the words and then reading them are so powerful. I just finished listening. Seattle Reads is also a powerful example of a shared literacy in action. It shows how books can reunite people and how libraries can connect our community with few other places that can do so. So before we get started, I just wanted to give you a little bit of housekeeping. There are restrooms right outside the door, which you'll use here and go around. There's also assisted listening devices available to you down here if you would like them. And then we have plenty of staff in the room. Just raise your hands and they will make sure that they come up and address whatever you need. We do want to thank you for your support and for coming together at the library tonight to celebrate literacy and poetry. We really do have a great program for you tonight. So to kick things off with this great program, I'd like to hand it over to Stacia Brandon, Literature and Humanities Program Manager for the Seattle Public Library. She has been overseeing Seattle Reads since 2017 and will give us a little bit more about this year's program before we get to the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Julie. And hi, everybody. Thank you so much for braving the tornado warnings and the hail warnings and all of that to be with us tonight. And hopefully everybody got here safely, and hopefully everybody will get home safely. So, how many of you have participated in Seattle Reads in the past? Oh, I love it. I love that it's a mixture of folks. So thank you to those of you who have been part of the program for as long as you have been. And thanks to the new folks tonight. I'm really happy to see new folks coming in every year. This year is really special. For only the second time in the history of Seattle Reads, we have selected a poetry collection. You Are Here, Poetry in the Natural World, edited by Ada Limon. It's a short anthology with 50 poems by different U.S. poets. The poems are accessible, and the collection encompasses themes of love, grief, environmental justice, and much more. You Are Here builds beautifully on many of the themes that were discussed as part of last year's Seattle Reads Parable of the Sower. and it invites readers to examine their own relationship with the natural world. So we know that some folks might not feel like they're poetry people, poetry readers. And so I wanted to just offer a couple of tips because I call myself poetry curious. I enjoy it, but I don't feel like I'm an expert. And when I was first reading You Are Here, I enjoyed reading a poem in the morning with my coffee. And I took this collection and I just read a poem or two every day and really sat with it. And it was such a beautiful way to let the poem kind of percolate and experience it. So I would encourage you to do that. It took a lot of pressure off, trying to get through the whole thing. And another tip is to try reading a poem out loud. And that's something that you can read to yourself, or you could read to a loved one or a pet. They like poems too. We're going to ask our panel of experts what some of their tips are in just a minute, but I wanted to just say that we worked really closely with community this year to put together 24 programs throughout April and May, including 3 public programs with Ada Limon, and she'll be coming in May, and I hope that you'll come to many of the programs throughout the next couple months. We divided the programs into different branches, like, the tree, listen, learn, discover, and share. And I am thrilled to welcome to tonight's panelists that will help us launch the program, and they're going to talk a little bit about their work. So from the far end on your right, we have Claudia Castro Luna. Claudia has been an Academy of American Poets Poet Laureate Fellow, the Washington State Poet Laureate, and Seattle's inaugural civic poet. She's the author of One River, a Thousand Voices, the Pushcart-nominated Killing Marias, shortlisted for the Washington State 2018 Book Award in Poetry, and the chapbook This City. And her most recent nonfiction can be found in the anthology There's a Revolution Outside My Love, Letters from a Crisis. Born in El Salvador, Claudia came to the U.S. in 1981, and living in English and Spanish, Claudia writes and teaches in Seattle on unceded Duwamish lands. Yay. Next, we have Jose Luis Montero. Jose Luis, otherwise known as Pepe Montero, is a bilingual writer, technologist, and literary advocate. Originally from Mexico, he spent 2 decades in the tech industry and explored diverse creative avenues, including radio, photography, and filmmaking, before turning his focus to storytelling. Holding both an MBA and MFAs in narrative and poetry, he adeptly merges technology and creativity across the for-profit and nonprofit spheres. His editorial journey includes internships at Copper Canyon Press and Narrative Magazine before joining the Jack Straw Writers Program in 2021, and committed to amplifying marginalized voices, particularly within the Latinx community. He champions equality and diversity in the arts throughout various nonprofit roles. As former president of Seattle Escribe, he now leads the board at Seattle City of Literature, an organization that manages this UNESCO designation for Seattle. And he serves as executive director at La Sala, a nonprofit that celebrates Latinx artists. And if that wasn't enough, he also serves as the acting executive director at Hugo House, a nonprofit writing center. Let's give Pepe a round of applause. Next up, we have the wonderful Laura Day. Laura is a poet and teacher and a lifetime resident of the Pacific Northwest. Laura studied creative writing at the University of Washington and the Institute of American Indian Arts. She is Eastern Shawnee, and her first book, Tributaries, was published by the University of Arizona Press and won a 2016 American Book Award. Laura has held residencies at the Hugo House, Tin House, and Jack Straw, and her newest book, Instruments of the True Measure, was the winner of the Washington State Book Award in 2019. And Laura's poem, Bad Wolf, is included in this year's Seattle Reads collection, You Are Here. Let's give Laura a round of applause. And our panelists are going to speak with the wonderful Katie Campbell. Katie joined KUOW's online team as an editor and reporter in 2024 after serving 3 years as senior producer of the local Morning Edition program. She's covered a variety of local topics, including the Seattle City Council, elections, and breaking news. And in 2024, Katie created the KUOW Book Club, which features stories and authors from the Pacific Northwest. Katie picks monthly titles and provides analysis along the way, and she ends each reading with an author interview, giving readers a look behind the scene from some of the most talented writers in the region. Katie's a graduate of the University of Florida College of Journalism, a pea patch gardener, and an auntie. Let's give Katie a round of applause, and please help me welcome our fantastic panelists.
Goodness, thank you all so much for being here. I am both honored to participate in this incredible program and deeply intimidated now, y'all. We have some really incredible talent in the city and certainly up here, and I'm really excited to dive into some of this with you all. So I'd like to start by asking, we just heard your fancy credentials, right? What makes you incredible writers and poets and leaders in our literary community. But tell me a little bit about yourselves, something that you maybe want to share with the audience about your work, what inspires it. And yeah, let's give a little tip to the audience about how to enjoy poetry and how to really connect with this particular pick. Let's start with you, Laura.
All right, thank you so much. And such a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm so pleased, such a lovely audience. As a poet, one thing that I think about a lot, especially when it comes to just the pleasure of reading this anthology and kind of being in community, is I often start on the land. So when I think of my own writing process, I can sometimes identify the place or the ecosystem where it began to germinate. And I think that that may connect to my suggestion for reading poetry. So I'm not sure that it's elaborated in my bio, but I come from a public school teaching background. So I taught middle school for almost 20 years.
Yes.
And I always really, truly feel that it was that experience that made me a poet, the sophistication, the beauty, the kind of wonderful mutuality of learning in that, particularly in that middle school space, really inspires me. So one of the things I loved best was to teach poetry. And right inside the heart of that, I think, is that idea of ambiguity. And that poetry lets us kind of be in ambiguity, not quite know where we are, feel both the pleasure and the tension of feeling perhaps a little bit lost as a reader. So I feel like one of the deep, deep pleasures, but also one of the kind of the cognitive keys to poetry is to embrace entering through ambiguity, to allow that confusion or the feeling of being lost is perhaps core to the human experience and is expressed very powerfully in poetry.
Thank you. Yeah, for me, what I would say is when I am reading something or when I write a story, a short story, a poem, I'm always looking for layers. I always think of stories and poems as like an onion, right? Where you peel a layer and you find something else, or at least, good literature should be that way. There's what you are reading, the story that you've been told, and there's also the story that's beneath the story. And that, to me, that's very important, both when I'm writing as well as when I'm reading. And for me, I would say when I read poetry, well, poetry is interesting because I would say that from all the different genres, from writing novels, writing short stories, writing flash fiction, I would say the shortest ones, flash fiction and poetry, are the hardest. People think that novels are really hard. They're not. They're just exhausting. But poetry and flash fiction are really hard because you really have to condense everything into just a few words, the right words. And so yeah, it's very interesting in that sense. So what I would say is when I read poetry, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for those layers, right? Those layers of meaning. And I'm also looking for, in particular, the musicality of what I'm reading. And that's why I would say, I believe Stacia said it before, but reading out loud is really, really important. I would say you want to read it first, perhaps in silence, try to digest it, and then try to read it out loud and listen for all those sounds, listen for all those rhythms, listen for that musicality. And then I would say also, if you have the opportunity, go online and look for that poem. Sometimes, as in the case of the poem that I'm going to talk about later today, sometimes you can find the author reading the poem, and that's really, really eye-opening, I would say, because you can actually feel the rhythm, that they intended to impart when they wrote the piece. And and granted that all of us, the reading process is really a writing process, right? It's like a movie. Let's say that a movie's made 3 times. When you write it the first time, when you write a script, when you film it, and the last time is when you edit it. The same happens with literature. When you write a story, you you go for something, right? And you hope that you actually got it in paper. Yet the reader actually receives it and does something else and interprets it a different way. So look for those interpretations, both your own and the author, and see the match. It's a really interesting exercise.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you both for that insight about both writing and reading. Um, and it's also very interesting because where I went was with image. And so here we are, 3 different writer readers talking about three very different aspects of reading a poem. I have said in the past, with my students, I say that to echo Pepe's, what Pepe was saying, that a poem is half baked until you read it out loud and it finds an audience. And in that encounter between the voice of the poet or whoever is reading it and the ears of the person listening, the poem really blooms and becomes itself. So yeah, I think of it as a halfway baked cake until it's voiced, because poetry is so oral and is richly oral, and it stems from an oral tradition. So the sounds and the line breaks and the intention so much so often is carried through the cadence and the pauses and line breaks in the poem. But just, we don't have to know the technical terms, it just sounds in a particular way. But for me, like I said, when reading this book, and in general reading poetry, but this book in particular, maybe because it's so beautiful, I read it in little bits. It was like eating chocolate cake. And if I try to eat too much of it, it was too much. So I could read maybe 1, 2, 3 poems, and then I would put them away. And part of that is this, what I was saying about images, because images speak in a subconscious way. We read them, but they really are working inside of us. They're a little like dreams. And as we walk after having read and go about our day or go to sleep, those images are now inside of us and continue to work through us. And so I think that allowing space between the poems for those images to fully bloom inside our minds and our hearts is really important. Another way of enjoying the poems, because they stay with with you. I mean, I have read Laura's work. I'm a huge admirer. There are images in Laura's work that I carry to this day that I've read in her poems. So yeah, I would say this metaphors and similes, and metaphors in particular, are these ways of making connections, right? A simile is a comparison between 2 things. A metaphor is also comparing things, but at a very deep level. So those images and that message and those comparisons are really, they're propulsive and they stay inside you. So my suggestion would be, take it slow, read 1 or 2 at a time, let it work through you, let it metabolize, and then, and reread. That's the other thing I do, is I reread. I go back and I reread. I think Laura's comment about the tension and feeling a bit lost is right on. And when that happens, I go back and I reread, and I think, okay, let me reread this. Let me take this again. And there's pleasure in the rereading and the rereading and rereading, because you may read the same poem many times over. And poems yield different things every time you read them, because we bring ourselves differently each time we read. It is an encounter between ourselves and the heart of the writer. So every time we show up to the poem, there may be something new there that we were not aware the first time we read.
I love that you say that. I found myself reading and also listening to, because you all really must try the audiobook. It's a totally different experience. Reading and then listening over and over, for example, to Bad Wolf. And there's a difference in the cadence from reading it yourself versus listening to someone speak it into existence, the shape your mouth makes when you form the word wolf. It's one thing to read that in my own voice and carry and bring my own, historical connections. It's another thing to hear someone else completely read it. And I'll be excited too at some point to hear you read it as well, Laura. So speaking of reading and hearing these things read into existence, we're going to do a little bit of that. And I would love if you would all share a poem or a section of a poem that really stood out to you, really did something different for you as you read or listened to this. And then talk a little bit too about what resonated, what made it just capture you. We'll start,
That-
let's start.
That's a tough call with this book because there's a lot of beautiful poems.
There's so much, yes.
I'm going to get up and go to the podium because
Please.
it's hard for me to read and have all these things. So.
While she gets set up, be thinking of questions y'all might have for our wonderful panelists as well. It's not every day we get this much talent in one room. And so if you have questions about poetry, if you're thinking about how to express yourself after reading this collection, please have that in mind because we will come for audience questions.
So the poem, there were many poems in this collection. Can you all hear me? The light was on. Can you hear me? Okay, I just have to get closer, I think. So the poem, there were many poems in this collection that captivated me. And I went back and forth, and I ended up choosing Paisley Rechdal's taking the Magnolia as the poem that I would read and talk about today. Paisley is a Seattleite. That's not why I chose the poem, but she's also somebody who, in a way, she lives in Utah, but she has roots here in Seattle. So I prepared some remarks, and then I'll get to the poem. I love the title that Ada Limon chose for this anthology, You Are Here. She implies with it a relationship to place. We are where we are. We live, work, think, dream, love, tethered to place. Geography is inescapable, but we often hardly notice it or take it for granted. The land, the soil upon which we walk, the trees around us, the flowers, the birds who coexist with us 24/7. We are surrounded by this life, and often we don't notice it. And there is a certain hubris in that attitude that can be described, I would say, sometimes as disdain, as a hierarchy that we have freely taken as normal for centuries. Humans are the pinnacle of the natural order. That is the premise. And we have accepted this with little questioning and taken full rapacious advantage of it, distorted and brought to extinction non-human life forms, forests, animals, for their pelts, their meats, their feathers, their eggs, for sport, the extermination of bison, but also minerals, petrol, water, etc. How lost, I think, some of us have been to accept that premise that humans are the pinnacle of creation, and how much we have lost in structuring society around that premise. There are too many examples of forests disappearing, of water sources drained, of entire animal species gone as a direct result of human action to go into that. We are aware of that, we know that. Some folks purport to explain that the repercussions of such demise and destruction, that they can explain the repercussions of that extermination and, in a way, abuse of natural resources. But I disagree with that. We don't know what may yet happen as a result of all the things, all the living things that we have lost, all the minerals we have lost. Look how a microscopic virus wreaked havoc and upended the order of things around the world. And that was just a microscopic thing, the coronavirus, right? And here we have actual forests that we've lost, animal species that we lost, plant species that we have lost. We don't know. We are all connected in ways that are, I would say, we don't know. We don't know all the myriad ways in which we are connected. And yet, despite all this destruction, nature is resilient. It teaches us this every day. There are poems in the anthology that write into this. Nature, spiders, snails, trees, flowers have much to teach us about finding our way back into ourselves. I really loved Victoria Chang's poem about watching a pair of eagles in Alaska. And by watching them finding a way back into herself, that she felt that she had been separated from herself, and just observing the eagles, she finds a connection to herself. It's a beautiful poem. Um, Chief Self said it very well. We are part of a web, and when we disrupt one strand, we disrupt all the other parts. I know this has been a long way to arrive at Paisley Rectal's poem, Taking the Magnolia on page 93. So I'm going to read the opening of the poem, and then I will tell you why this poem captivated me.
May I jump in just
Yes.
briefly to play producer for a second?
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. So, Taking the Magnolia. Always, I'd, I'd said, of this slow upswelling, flames of white, purple, royal, purple, they called this magnolia. The winds shivered, split to its drought splintered crotch. The tree will not make it a 15th, a 20th winter. I watched it once east into the ground where a neighbor planted it. Now I watch her son take it down, take it with all the buds of its renewing, flowers always on the verge of flowering into a future that will not reliably come. Always is not a word we are allowed to use anymore about anything in the world. We must put some part of it into a category of pure mind now. No deepening snow, no blue eyed glacier, the damp skinned buds peeled open only to rot. A thousand candles, thousand mouths widen their pink atop what the arborist calls unhealable wound. So I'll stop there. The poem goes on to describe how she is determined, and she deposits the image and this tree into her mind so that it could continue to exist and not forgotten. And each year, she says, the tree will bloom as it did. This glorious magnolia will continue to bloom because this is what happens when we love something. When we love something, we grieve, she says. And we want to keep some essence of the thing we loved. And so for her is this internalizing of this image of the tree. So that's the poem. It reminded me a little bit of Shakespeare in the ending of her saying, this is how I keep this alive, right, in her mind. But she's also keeping it alive in the poem itself. And every time we come to read the poem, the tree blooms again and is there again for us to see it in our mind's eye. So she's keeping it in her body, and she's keeping it always in the existence of the book. Um, it's a gorgeous poem. It's a gorgeous poem about the passing of time. It's about watching this sapling go in and then become too old and sick, that it gets taken down. It speaks eloquently about grief. Like I said, we grieve what we love. The poem itself keeping time and keeping the tree alive, right? And us being part of that perpetual motion because we come as readers to this poem. But what the poem did for me, aside all this, just a wonderful moment to think about grief and to think about the things we are losing and the sadness for watching nature disappear in front of our eyes, the thing that it did for me was it filled me with a fire. It filled me with a desire to say, so what? So what if I see the tree dying? So what if I know that this polar ice cap is disappearing? What am I going to do about it? That the poem ignited something in me to want to turn grief into action. And I felt very strongly afterwards. I sat there with with this heat in my body after reading that I don't want that to happen to trees. I don't want the magnolias or any tree to go away and become an imaginary thing rather than the thing itself. So how am I going to bring myself up to the present moment, up to this place where I am, up to this you are here, to say, what am I going to do then in real time, to do a teeny little part to protect and to prevent this destruction from moving further? So thank you. That's an open question. What are we going to do?
Thank you for that.
Thank you so
That
much.
is beautiful. Thank you. Sorry to ask anyone to follow that up because my goodness, that was so thoughtful and powerful. And that is the kind of thing we hope Seattle Reads does for us, right? Is to inspire those questions and that self-reflection. Now, luckily, I know Pepe, you know how to follow up a performance like that. So please share a piece that you enjoyed.
Not
if you'd
sure
like
about
to use
that,
the
but I'm
podium.
also gonna go to the
Yeah, of
podium
course.
if you don't mind. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Thank you. So the poem I chose, I mean, as you can see in this book, I like a lot of poems. But the one that really hit me really hard in the head was the one by Carrie Fountain called You Belong to the World. It's on page 7. It's the first poem of the book. And I'd like to read it first and then mention some remarks about why I liked it. So, sorry, it's page 7. Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I was a producer, I can't get out of the habit.
Yeah, is it better? Oh, thank you. Yeah. You belong to the world, as do your children, as does your husband. It's strange even now to understand that you are a mother and a wife, that these gifts were given to you and that you received them, fond as you've always been of declining invitations. You belong to the world, the hands that put a peach tree into the earth, exactly where the last one died in the freeze, belong to the world and will someday feed it again, differently. Your body will become food again for something, just as it did so humorously when you became a mother. Hungry beings clamoring at your breast, born as they've been with the bodily passion for survival that is our kind's one common feature. You belong to the world, animal. Deal with it. Even as the great abstractions come to take you away, the regrets, the distractions, you can at any second come back to the world to which you belong. The world you never left, won't ever leave, cells forever, forever going through their changes as they have as they have been since you were less than anything. Simple information born inside your own mother's newborn body, itself made from the stuff your grandmother carried within hers when at 12 she packed her belongings and left the Scottish island she'd known, all she'd ever known, on a ship bound for Ellis Island, carrying within her your mother, you, the great human future that dwells now inside the bodies of your children, the young, which, like you, belong to the world. Thank you. It's It's a beautiful poem. I mean, it's and like like I mentioned before, I like to peel layers. So I'm going to start with the outer layer. For to me, is the you can see how the poem goes right into the point, right? I mean, the title "You Belong to the World" is basically part of the poem. Like the author is not wasting any time to get us right into what she wants to talk about. And there's this repetition. You belong to the world. You belong to the world, and giving us different scenarios of why we belong to the world. And not only repetition, but also when you get to the very end, you feel like you've come back to the beginning. So there's this whole circularity that's happening within the form itself, which to me, um, it makes a lot of sense, and it marries what this poet's trying to say. That basically, she's trying to mimic, in my opinion, like the circle of life, right? Which is you were born, you grow up, you reproduce, and you die, right? So this circularity is also uh, part of the form of how Carrie actually wrote this. And then you start looking into, I mean, and and I'm sorry, English is not my first language, so um, a lot of the sounds and the pronunciation, it's actually better if you actually go to Carrie actually published this poem at the New Yorker, and if you go and look online for the poem, you can actually the landing page has a recording of Carrie reading her own poem, and you're gonna hear all that musicality that's going on, all those sounds that repeat themselves, not just the words but the sounds, right? But besides that, um, peeling back into another layer, right? There's so many things that Carrie's talking about. She's talking about family, about matrimony. She's talking about lineage, immigration. Um, she's talking about the physical world and life, death, rebirth, right? And but to me, the thing that makes this poem is, interestingly enough, right at the if you look at it, I printed it here, and it's actually right at the very center. It's what they call a uh, forget the word. Anyway, like when you open a door, it has those hinges. Yeah, it's a hinge poem basically. So you have the most important thing right in the middle, and to me that is, you belong to the world, animal, deal with it. And then it goes to talk about the great abstractions, and that actually brought me into discussion I was having with my partner, because they were reading this book called *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind* by Yuval Noah Harari. Probably mispronounces his name, sorry. But this book talks about how Homo sapiens came to dominate, you know, the world, right? We're not the only humans that ever roamed the earth. There's so many different kinds, so many species of humans, yet we were the ones who won uh, against all odds. And it talks about how this happened, right? And it talks about how uh, typically anthropologists have found that people typically can care to up to 50 other humans, right? Maybe 100 at the most. People who are close to you, that you care about, that you belong to, right? Over that, I mean, it's the others, right? And in order for us to survive as a species, we invented this belief, concept of belief, right? This idea of belief, and these beliefs are actually what ended up making us what we are now, right? So, because what happened before is, like, if you only care about 50 or 100 humans, the other group is only gonna care about themselves and gonna fight each other until you kill each other, right? And go into extinction. However, by creating these beliefs, like the belief of a nation, the belief of peace and law and order, those beliefs, I mean, it's all abstraction, right? But it's what actually hold us together, right? It's what prevent us uh, from like going and ransacking someone's house I mean, it's not the door that you put in, it's not the fence that's keeping people from coming in. It's the belief that that is your property. The idea of private property, which really is something that we invented, right? Because I mean, who owns the world? Nobody, right? But we decided that this little piece of land, our house, is ours, and we should, nobody should come in but us unless we invite them. And that belief is what allows us to, live close to each other and not come and like, ransack your house and because I like, your food instead of mine, right? So all of these notions like religions, nations, corporations, laws, private property, even money. Money, I mean, the paper bill is a piece of paper, right? It only has value because we all believe that it has value. So coming back to the poem, it says, "You belong to the world animal, deal with it. Even as the great abstractions come to take you away, the regrets, the distractions, you can at any second come back to the world to which you belong." So this whole opposition between the world and the abstractions is what caught my eye, because if you think about it, we live in a world of abstractions that we made ourselves, right? The idea that we have to work and do a certain thing to actually, earn money and then exchange it for something that somebody else produced we can actually eat, right? And the whole idea of division of labor is another abstraction. When this phone, I mean, this phone, yeah, it's physical, but really it's an abstraction because it's not the metal, it's not the glass that you are actually using. It's not a door stopper, right? It's all the information that's coming through and all the things that you're able to do with it. And yet, and we think that we live in this world, yet where we really live is here, right? In the physical moment, the physical presence, and having these juxtapositions come in and so interestingly, be interweaved in this poem is what actually it floored me, basically. And there's so many layers here that I could go on, but I won't because I love to hear what Laura has to say.
Thank you for that. Would you like to take the podium?
All right, it's been so wonderful to hear these poems and the incredible thinking behind them. And I've been really looking forward to reading this poem with you all tonight. So this poem is on page 29. If anybody would like to follow along. I find this poem to be an incredible delight. So I hope that you will get a little bit of that tonight too. This poem is written by Jose Oliveras. And one thing that I want to kind of point out is a beauty of anthologies is when you come across a poem that you really love, they give you some information about how to find more. So that's one thing that I love to just encourage is, there's so many incredible poets represented in this book. And it can be a doorway that lets you see even more of this poet's world. So I encourage folks to, read widely in this book, but then maybe use it as a way to read even more poetry. This poem is titled, "You Must Be Present." I say to myself, when the what wears all up in the how now. Trees. I turn to the trees for relief and they say, nah. Don't look at us. You don't even know our names. You don't even know the difference between an oak tree and a maple tree. It's true. My relationship with love, nature, money, fill in the blank, is like my relationship to weather. I only see it when it's pouring on my head. I'm sorry to the trees I grew up with. I didn't ask. I never learned or even wondered about their names, their families, their longings. I only dreamed of me, climbing onto their shoulders. Honestly, I was a ladybug to them, only heavier,
and more annoying. Those trees I grew up with were generations older than me. They were practiced at living in a way I would never understand. And all I could imagine was the view from their crown. Oak trees, they were oak trees, with their own history of migration, rooted in Calumet City like me. If I asked them for answers, I wouldn't have understood. Sunlight, water, sunlight, water, sunlight, water. I chose this poem because it brought me some things that I feel particularly honored when poetry does. The first is a sense of delight, a sense of invitation and participation, a doorway that I felt that I could connect to even from my earliest memories. And then ultimately, the poem did something, at least for me, that I always feel is kind of like a transformation that poetry can bring, which is with multiple readings, I sort of better understood its fundamental truth, its plain spokenness, its dismantling of the hierarchies of what we need, who we are, or where we are in the ecosystem. And so this was a poem that I came back to really often in this collection. And I also, one thing that I admire more generally as I kind of read through this anthology is there's a beautiful rhythm of style, of different approach, under kind of the understory of the whole anthology is that you get this glimpse of place by way of a person's entry into ecosystem. But I love too that it's tonally different, not only through sound, but also through emotion. And some of the poems are quite heavy and engage really deeply with climate grief. And some of the poems enter through perhaps a sense of levity, of humor. So I always find that to be such a beautiful reckoning of the human condition, when we can get a little glimpse at all of these different ways that we kind of navigate the spaces that we live in. And then another kind of delightful piece of this poem is I thought, well, this is the one that I would bring into a 7th grade classroom to introduce this anthology. So that was guiding my selection as well. Thank you.
My favorite thing about my job now is that I get to hear from brilliant people like these three, not only about their work, but that extra layer of just like curiosity and inspiration. And it's extra special with Laura, I should say, because the KOW Book Club is partnering with Seattle Reads this year, and we're going to be reading You Are Here next month as a club. And on April 24th, we'll be right back here with Laura and Cedar Saigo to read their poetry, to read their poems that are featured in this collection, and to hear more about that. And I hope you all will join us for that too. So it's nice to get I get a little sneak taste. Yeah. And if I may just share a couple of lines from one of my favorites. I actually lived in Arizona for about 5 years before I came up here to Seattle. Very grateful to be out of the desert, I would say. So Eduardo C. Corral's To a Blossoming Saguaro really stood out to me. And he's talking to a saguaro cactus, which are protected in Arizona. They only grow in the Sonoran Desert, which extends into Arizona, and it's literally illegal to shoot them or harm them or uproot them from their homes. They're so precious. And Corral says to the, I'm so sorry, I don't know what page. Can anyone help me? 17. I'm just going to read 2 lines from it. So he's speaking to this blossoming saguaro. And he says, "You have more rights than the undocumented. I need a permit to uproot you." And for me, as someone who has lived among the saguaros, who fell in love with them, they're beautiful creatures of life. They house so many different animals and they contribute so much to the land. And they are considered sacred. And so to have Eduardo point out simultaneously that sacredness and how they are important and how our world is important, and also commenting on how we hold them above human lives and certain human lives. lives, right? He specifically says you have more rights than the undocumented. And that really stood out to me as someone who has interacted with those creatures in all sense of the word. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you. Now, we'd like to know what y'all are working on for Seattle Reads. What programs are you working on? How are you looking at the rest of the programming? Why don't we start with you this time, Pepe? Curveball.
I actually have it here, so I don't forget. So actually, I'm working on two programs actually.
Beautiful.
Yeah, one of them is with sorry, 1 second here.
You want me to chime in, Pepe?
One of them is Pongo Poetry Project, right? And I'm just here it is. So the first one is called Landscapes of Healing, and it's happening on May 22nd at Hugo House. And like I mentioned before, it is a collaboration between Hugo House and Pongo Poetry Project. And basically what we're doing here is we I don't know if you know Pongo, but Pongo actually works with incarcerated youth, and so we're gonna have a workshop with incarcerated youth, and we're gonna use this book as a basis for the workshop. And the youth are gonna write poems, and then we are gonna read them at Hugo House. Now, the youth cannot actually go to Hugo House, unfortunately, to read them themselves. So we're going to have readers both from Pongo, some of the mentors that work with the youth, the students, and also some community members from Hugo House read the work that was the outcome of that workshop. And yeah, it's going to be great. So May 22nd. And then I believe May 27th, it's the
May 29th.
sorry, May 29th. It's the second one with La Sala, and this one is called Writing the Land. And this is another reading. It's happening here at the Seattle Public Library. And it's basically a reading of Latinx poets that have been published in this project called Writing the Land, which is a very interesting project. It's a project that marries writers with protected lands. And basically, the writer adopts protected land, and they write a piece about that, right? And they create these different anthologies. I believe every year, yeah, every year there's a different anthology. And so we're lucky that several people from the Seattle area actually have been published. I believe both of you have been, right? And yeah, so it's going to be a reading here at the library, and it's going to be, the majority of them are going to be people who are published, but also some people who were not published, but are going to be sharing some poems that are related to that topic as well.
Sounds like a certain audio station could help maybe record with kids. We'll talk. What programs are you working on? Yeah.
Well, I am very excited to be doing two programs with Seattle Public Library at two separate branches. And I have and these are going to be, I'm super excited about this project. I should have been ready here. On April 26th at between 2 and 3:30, I'm doing a program that Stesha Brandon named called Poetries. And I love the name. And this is going to be at the Columbia City branch. And we've been thinking about doing this program for a long time. And it's perfect. There was a reason why this didn't happen earlier, because I've been working on my new work is centered on trees, my own personal work. And I've been teaching a class at Hugo House for the past 4 years about trees. And so this is comes out of that, curiosity and just my own personal where I am with my work. And so this is a workshop at the Columbia City branch. And then on May 3rd, I will be doing an amazing program. I'm super excited about this. And at the South Park branch called Verde que te quiero verde, or Oh Green How I Love You. And this is a bilingual program at the South Park branch. And this really centers families and children. Everyone is welcome. You're welcome to both of these programs. If the weather really holds up, our hope has been to do the program at Columbia City outside of that library branch because there are very beautiful trees right outside of it. And then I will plug my class at Hugher House, which this year is called Green Expectations. I tweak the class every year. And this year I've titled it Green Expectations, and it will start April 22nd through June 17th. That's a Tuesday. So every Tuesday for 8 weeks. And it's always so fun to do this class that just centers trees.
It's amazing.
It's from 5 to 7. Yeah.
And I think it speaks to the extent of the incredible programming that Stasha has helped set up and that Seattle Public Library has set up around this book. Yes. That we're all looking for our pieces. Laura, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the first thing I want to share before I get even more kind of into the events that I'm really looking forward to personally is this morning I kind of gave myself the treat of looking at all of the offerings around this, and it's like the most delicious little menu you could ever order from. So I'm so excited that this community enrichment around literacies is available. I'm really, really looking forward to trying to go to some of these classes. And so just that general encouragement of how incredibly rich and delightful this kind of host of workshops and readings and engagements is, it really made my day. I was thrilled by it. And I'm really looking forward to being able to be in discussion around the book club with this book alongside Cedar Saigo. And that is on Thursday, April 24th. And then I'll look forward to once more doing a reading with Cedar Saigo, in May. And that, I believe, is Tuesday, May 20th. Thank you. So really looking forward to those two discussions and readings, and I hope that folks will return to many of these events.
Well, as promised, I believe we have about 5 minutes for audience questions. So if we have a couple of succinct ones, that would be fantastic. Where are we sending our mics? Don't be shy. You are here, folks.
I see a question over there.
Perfect.
Yes, no?
No, maybe? Beautiful.
Hi, can you hear me? I happen to have read the Sawara poem last night, and another good line was how the shadow is his father. Not really a question.
It is a beautiful line. The part of the poem says, "Your shadow will stretch longer than my father's life." Those aren't the exact words, but the point being that this Sawara will outlive us. But again, drawing those connections to humanity too.
We have a question here.
Beautiful.
Hi there. I was curious what you guys do with writer's block. Like, what do you do when you find yourself wanting to tell a story in a poem, but it just doesn't feel like it's coming out the right way, or it's not saying the thing that you wanted to say? Like, you're thinking through all those layers of the onion, and you're like, oh, but is it landing?
She's asking about writer's block, just in case it's hard to. Please.
I will say very quickly, you are one of the best things I learned as a young poet was go for the low-hanging fruit and center yourself. This is what I was told. Where you are, look at the window, see what's happening, and even bring what's outside or what's happening around you into the poem as a way of grounding yourself. And, like I tell my own children, writing is editing, right? There's many passes for a piece of writing to become itself. And so throw at it everything you have, and it's okay if it doesn't fit. You will return to it and shape it. It won't happen immediately.
Do you have something to add?
Just one thing to add to that, because I think it's such a rich question around writer's block. And I think writer's block is really healthy. It's like an element of seasonality. So I think to embrace it as not a deterrent, but just a really natural rhythm.
And just for anyone curious, that question was from S.B. Jimenez, former Seattle journalist extraordinaire, who now works at the Boston Globe. So sorry, Esme. Yes. I'm terribly sorry. I think we have one more question here. Yes.
So you are here, you belong, you must be present. These are all invitations to get out of disconnection and dislocation. And yet here we are, you know, like we all have these phones in our pockets and everything. And I'm curious what we have to give up in order to really accept the invitation.
Who wants to tackle that?
We are called to necessarily give up because the gain is so enormous in being present and connected. I do think that she's making Ada in her compilation is making a call to connection. That's why I love that poem by Victoria Chang of how do I reconnect with myself, and nature and so many poems here teaches us that return to ourselves. And I think that act of returning and being present and grounded and here in the moment is far outweighs what we may lose were we not looking at the news or looking at some reel, because that is our big distraction, you know, or even reading could become a source of like nervousness and nervous reading, right? Like eating cookies, you're reading all the time or something. So it also has, I mean, we could think of it as virtuous, but it could be, if it's so much like this, reading could also be a detraction. So I don't know that we have to give up anything. I think that what we gain is so far bigger and more enriching for ourselves than what we might lose.
I'll add one thing. I recently talked to author C. Pam Zhang, who wrote Land of Milk and Honey, which is a beautiful quasi-post-apocalyptic book. And one thing she talked about was pleasure and the things we enjoy, especially in dark times, can be an act of resistance and an act of revolution, just to find joy. And even if that's a few minutes on your phone at night to scroll and look at some cute cats, not that I do that at all, ever. Those moments that help you stay grounded are also really important to your greater pursuit. I really loved what Pam said about that, so I just wanted to share. I think we have time for one more.
I saw a hand over here. Yes?
Perfect.
Last question?
I'm not sure you're the audience to answer this, or the speakers to answer this, but it's just a practical question about the selection process for these poems, because there's so many choices of wonderful poems out there. So maybe we have to go to Ada Limon to get that, but I didn't know whether someone knew something.
Laura, do you happen to know, since you are in the book, you went through the process?
Yeah, this is a great question about sort of the selection process. And I probably have to confess that, you know, as the writer, I'm kind of on one side of that. So I didn't get to really see like how the sausage was made, as it were. But I know that it was a really thoughtful process because, you know, poetry is a beautifully connected world, I feel. So often there's mutual discussion. And so as a writer in the anthology, I was contacted directly. But I think a lot of consideration went in. And I think like any ecosystem, I imagine this is just, it's kind of like, these are the lenses, but the whole poetry world is the intended space of being or learning. So I hope with every anthology, because there's only so many pages, that it's an invitation to engage in the whole literary ecosystem. So that's maybe not a very precise answer, but I don't always know how exactly the decision was. But I can say I think it was quite thoughtful, quite vetted, and quite collaborative.
I'm going to jump in here and just say that all of the poems were also previously unpublished. So that was something that was part of that. So these have not been published elsewhere when the when the collection came together. But you should come and ask Ada that on May 16th and 17th. Yeah.
And if I may say, I would say that also, if you think about it, it's thinking about this, it's curating is another form of storytelling, just like, you know, putting an exhibit in a museum is also a form of storytelling. And I mean, I don't know exactly what happened when Ana Limon chose the poems. I did work as an intern in Upper Canyon Press a while back after my MFA, and I can tell you that it's a lot of care goes into reading, and it's usually not just one person, but many people, many eyes looking into what's going to go into a book. But eventually, the editor is the person who's going to curate, who's going to decide what goes in, what doesn't go in, and usually it has to do with the vision, what story they want to tell. And once you read the book, you probably get a pretty good idea of what Ada was trying to tell us, right? And it's in the title. We're here. I mean, we should respect the world.
Well, before I introduce our last speaker of the evening, I just want to thank our panelists, invite you all to give them a round of applause for their incredible work, their thoughtfulness. Y'all are amazing. Beautiful. Yes. And now I'd like to welcome someone very important to the lifeblood of the Seattle Public Library system. We've got Brian Lawrence, the CEO of the SPL Foundation. Thank you so much for having us, Brian. Oh.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you, Katie, for approaching the Seattle Public Library about collaborating with the KUOW Book Club. You're a great partner, and we look forward to many more programs together. And to our panelists, Claudia, Laura, Jose Luis, amazing programming. We are so deeply honored to be able to support it and make it possible. And I love how you're thinking about how to engage many different communities in Seattle in this amazing work. So thank you. Another round of applause for our panelists. So again, I'm Brian Lawrence. I'm the CEO of the Seattle Public Library Foundation. We are the nonprofit partner of the library, and we help the library, enhance the library above and beyond what public funding provides. Julie Zunker, our board member, thank you for being here. Sharon Hamill, another board member, we appreciate your service. And we appreciate all of you. Many of you invited tonight are donors of the Seattle Public Library Foundation, and you make a lot possible to help us expand programs and bring opportunities for our community to come together and be in community, and that's really special. I also want to have a huge shout out to the Seattle Times for all their promotion of the various programs that we do. So, you know, as Julie said, we provide about $5.2 million in support to our public library. Thank you. And that's really, I wish you all could be here this week. About 10:30 every morning we've had, or every other morning, we've had the Global Reading Challenge here, where this auditorium has been packed with kids from about 70 different public schools in Seattle. Craig Seasholes is a former Seattle Public Schools librarian, has been involved with the program for years. But it's one of the ways that we are trying to help young people stay connected to the love and build a deep love for books and literacy in our community. You know, we're kind of going through a little bit of a literacy crisis right now. 60% of kids are not reading at grade level. And that's kind of, that's something that we need to work on. And so we're really committed to helping our community do that. We're also really excited to work on a lot of programs to help people develop skills. You know, I was at Microsoft earlier today. We have a lot of LinkedIn learning programs online, but also a lot of certifications and stuff like that, so people can use the library for free programs to build skills. So we're really excited about that. So our goals are for every age, for every person to be able to use our library, to be able to love it, and to be able to help people achieve what they hope to achieve in their life. One of the things I also want to say is how can all of you help? There are a couple ways that you can always stay involved with the Seattle Public Library Foundation. First of all, I've started coming to these programs to talk more about what we do because we have 8,000 donors, but we have 250,000 cardholders. So a few more people need to know about helping the library. So that's why I'm up here today. But also, one of the ways you can help is by using your voice. I don't know if you heard, but last Friday, the federal government decided that they were going to do an executive order to reduce the funding for the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And it's kind of a travesty because it helps a lot of our rural and our small libraries. And Seattle Public Library will be impacted as well. But you can grab one of these little bookmarks up here with the QR code. It's a thing called the Public Library Action Network. And we are asking people to sign up for this little plan thing that we have. And when we need your help for you to send a note to a policymaker, we're going to reach out and we're going to give you a nice script that says what you stand for and why you think that libraries matter and why you think that public programs like this matter, so that we can make sure that our libraries are not just funded, but are able to provide access to information and knowledge so that people can make really smart decisions in our society. So I encourage you, those bookmarks up there, I hope they're all gone tonight. So take them, give them to your friends, and encourage them to sign up to help your library. And I'll also close by saying Library Giving Day is April 1st. You'll probably get 12,000 emails from me between now and then, just encouraging you to make a gift if you can. If you cannot, that's okay. We just appreciate your consideration, and we hope that you'll just continue to use and love these Seattle Public Libraries, every branch, no matter what your neighborhood is. Please tell everybody about our libraries. And thank you all for being here. Grab some sandwiches and chips on your way out, and have a great night. Thank you.